G'day fellow AvGeeks. Due to the pandemic, we've had to move our LinkedIn tutorial online for the safety of our students and guests. And in aviation, safety is our #1 priority. In this tutorial, we'll be helping you build a solid foundation for you to go out and network with industry people. LinkedIn is a great app to connect and keep up with the industry. Without further ado, let's get started. Assuming that you have an account already, I'll be using Alan Joss's profile as an example. I'll first talk about the headline. The headline is really important because it's the first thing people read. It helps show what you do, and depending on what your purpose is, you should use different keywords to attract people in the search bar. For example, I will highly recommend you put aviation student at UNSW over just student at UNSW, because using the keyword aviation increases your chances of coming up in the search bar when people search for the word aviation. Moving on to the summary. So this section is a summary about yourself. Unfortunately, this section only shows the first few lines when people access your account. So you want to grab the reader's attention to read more about you. There are many ways to approach your summary. You can write it in first person or third person, but I highly recommend you use the first person so it's more of a deeper and personal connection between you and the person reading about you. If you can, tell a quick story about yourself, who you are, what you do, why you do that, and why is it important, and maybe a few accomplishments and qualifications. It is also important adding expertise using keywords to attract people when doing a search. For example, customer service, leadership, and communications in your summary should show an employer what makes you unique, and in terms of employment, what makes you different from the other candidates and what can you contribute. As you create your profile, you'll discover more about what you want to get out of LinkedIn, and there should be constant updates on your summary. As a tip, to get noticed on search results, pick your words wisely. Don't put "I like planes." Instead, maybe put "passionate about aviation." Or instead of "I can talk to people," put "well-developed communications and customer service skills." Now that we've talked about your headline and summary, we'll go over to Vulcan to talk about your work experience all the way up to your education and skill endorsements.
We will be going through adding skills to your LinkedIn profile, along with understanding endorsements. Now first of all, go to your LinkedIn profile. Here you can see that you have different sections of your profile, such as your experience or your education. Click on Add Profile section and find the Skills section to add your new skills. Now the best way to add skills to your LinkedIn page is to make a list of professional traits about yourself. From the list, choose only the skills you think would impress your future employers. Next, think about whether these skills that you have selected would impress your employers. For example, these that I have chosen seem to resemble someone who may be applying for a marketing-related role in a business. You can add up to 50 skills on your profile. However, try to keep your page as simple as possible, as you don't want to scare away any employers. Once you have added your skills, you can see that once you scroll down, your skills are over here, at the bottom, depending on where you have chosen to put them. Over here, you can see that I have one endorsement for Microsoft Office. But to look at a better example, let's search up Dr. Tony Weber. On Tony's page, we can scroll down to see his skills and his endorsements. Endorsements are good indicators to employers, showing them that the skills that you have shared are in fact skills that you are good at. Looking at Tony's page, the 3 most endorsed skills are economics, with more than 99 endorsements, forecasting with 62 endorsements, and analysis, with 58 endorsements. Clicking on the Show More button gives you the rest of the skills and the endorsements that he has. To endorse somebody, simply just click on the plus next to their skill. Once you have clicked the Endorsed button, you may choose to give a bit of a summary of the reasoning of your endorsement. For example, I would think that Dr. Tony is highly skilled at aviation. And over here, if I wanted, I could select my relationship to him and then submit. Now he has one more endorsement on aviation. From looking at the top 3 most endorsed skills on Dr. Tony's page, we can see that he is very efficient and well at economics, forecasting, and analysis. This is a very good indicator, as I said, to employers, as someone who would be wanting to hire Tony can see that these are the areas that he is most proficient in, and that lots of other people who are also highly skilled in that area have endorsed Tony Weber for that skill.
These are a few tips to expanding your network on LinkedIn and building connections within the industry. The first tip is to have a fully optimized profile.
This is the UNSW Aviation Society LinkedIn page where we upload all of our events and just update our followers regarding the Society's activities. To have a fully optimized profile, you want to ensure you have an eye-catching profile picture and also have a headline that will be of interest to your connections and to the people you're trying to network with. So you want to find the right people to connect with. So all you need to do is search up something within the aviation industry. As you can see, some companies have already come up. You can just enter in and you'll start to see companies. Now you've got options here to choose people, jobs, content, and so on. But you can just go straight into people and start going through. Anyone that has mentioned aviation on their LinkedIn profile will pretty much come up here, and you can have a browse through people's accounts and see if they're of an interest to connect with.
Customizing your connection request is a great way to introduce yourself to potential recruiters or just people that you want to connect with within the industry.
Once you hit connect, it will ask you if you want to customize the invitation, and you can simply just add a note and write a little message and send that invitation through.
If you're hoping to connect with someone that hasn't connected with you yet, you can definitely go ahead and engage within their newsfeed. This will bring attention towards your profile, and the more consistent you are, the higher the likelihood they will see your profile. That way you can send them a request and see if they'll add you again.
Well, Tony Weber is one of our panelists for the LinkedIn workshop. You want to connect with them, and all you can do is send them a message if you're interested, or when you are connecting with them, add a note.
Hopefully these tips have helped you get a better understanding of the best ways to improve your LinkedIn profile and also building those connections and those networks.
Hey UNSW Aviation Society. Today for our LinkedIn workshop, we have a special guest, Dr. Anthony Weber. Many of you would know him from AVI 1901 from Air Transport Economics. So he's one of our
the best subject in the world, by the way.
Yeah, exactly, and I'm pretty sure we can all agree with that.
Yeah.
Tony Weber also holds a PhD in economics from UNSW, and he's also the former chief economist for Qantas. He also has an extensive media profile, having done interviews with all major free-to-air TV channels and radio stations in Australia. Also, major international TV channels such as BBC Asia, BBC London, and Sky News, frequently traveling around the world on aviation, presenting on aviation issues. Tony Weber is currently the CEO and founder of Airline Intelligence and Research, an aviation research company which consults to many airlines and holds one of the largest databases for aviation financial and operational data. Well, Tony Weber, it's a pleasure to have you today.
That's quite possibly the longest introduction in the world.
Well,
but it was good.
All right. Well, I need to show you your full self. Yeah. All right. So clearly you have an impressive career background. Could you tell us how have you used your LinkedIn to advance your career in aviation?
Well, I think I got into LinkedIn in and around 2009, 2010, actually very close to the global financial crisis. And I really didn't, initially when I started using it, it wasn't meant to actually generate business because I was employed at the time. And I think I was employed at Qantas. I would have been, yeah. Mm. So it wasn't really meant to, it was more like, everyone else is doing it, so why shouldn't I? And so that's why I got it on there, and I hardly used it. But when I left Qantas, that's when I really saw the opportunity with using LinkedIn as a means of marketing myself and getting greater exposure. and especially when I left Qantas in 2011 and I joined the University of Sydney and I built my own consulting business. That's when I really started using it. Probably not to any significant degree early on, but over the past 4 or 5 years, I've been using it, almost non-stop. And I typically write around one post every week or every 2 weeks, depending on how busy I am. And those sort of posts generate exposure. And in my case, it's generated a lot of consulting business. Just now, like the last 2 months, I've had 4 or 5 consulting jobs just on the basis of LinkedIn posts. So it's been a really, like the last 3 or 4 years, it's been um, a social media platform that's really benefited my business.
All right. Well, you did say it's for networking a lot of people and over 600 million users on LinkedIn. I think for myself, I think I was falling behind on this party as I only created my account last week. So I guess tell us, why is LinkedIn important for us students?
Well, aviation students in particular, it's incredibly important because there are a lot of aviation people that are members of LinkedIn or a part of the LinkedIn world. There's a lot of, I have, I think, 4,000 followers and more than that. And the aviation people are really curious. They like looking at aviation articles and reading them because the business is complicated and they need to understand more about it. And so a lot of aviation people on LinkedIn and a lot of aviation HR people are on LinkedIn. So if you're an aviation student, then it's really important you get on LinkedIn because there's a lot of HR people within aviation that are on LinkedIn and they're looking for bright, smart people to work for airlines, and not just airlines, airports, and lots of other companies in the aviation supply chain.
You mentioned that you were also an employer. So Tony, in your experience, if people put their LinkedIn profile in their resume, is it likely for employers to look at it, and will it boost their chance of getting an interview?
Yeah, no, it definitely will. There's no doubt about that in my mind. What I typically get is a lot of people contacting me directly asking whether I have opportunities. So I'm sure that that's a lot of students as well. I get a lot of queries from students who are studying all over the world. In fact, my biggest market is probably the Hong Kong market. I have a lot of people listening and watching me from Hong Kong, aviation people, students in aviation. Hong Kong market's big, the London market's big, the US market's big. So yes, it's important that you put it on your CV. It's important that you get your name out there on LinkedIn as early as you can. It's important that you read articles on aviation that are posted on LinkedIn, and it's important that you're visible to the HR people within aviation on LinkedIn. In my view, it's a really important device for you.
I'm sure we all know they're saying it's not what you know, it's who you know. And I guess for aviation management graduates, I think that's particularly true. So I guess, what are some effective ways to network and connect with people through LinkedIn?
I think one really important way that I've found is to comment on the articles of the aviation writers within LinkedIn. Don't necessarily contact them directly, but one way you can, because that can be annoying, right? So you don't want to be annoying these people. So one of the ways you can do it is to read an article or a post that they've written, and if you're impressed with it, if you're impressed with certain aspects of it, if you want to provide some positive feedback on the article, then write a comment, because the writers of the articles read all of these comments. And so that's one way to indirectly generate interest and some sort of connection with people who are on LinkedIn, by commenting on their articles, by liking their articles, because that's what happens with me. I mean, I write, as I said, 1 or 2 posts every week or every couple of weeks, and I get people all over the world commenting on them, and I read all of their comments, and if it's a useful comment, I'll write back to them. And that's when you start forming relationships with them. So that's one way. Directly reaching out to them, you can do that, and I get a lot of that on my LinkedIn. You know, I'd get probably 5 to 10 people per week connecting with me on LinkedIn on the basis of the articles I've written. So you can do that, and you can message them directly, but that can be annoying to the person receiving the messages. So my advice would be to do it indirectly. That's a nice way of doing it.
So you are pretty active on LinkedIn. Like you said, you do post frequently articles on LinkedIn.
Yep.
You frequently write about the financial performance of many airlines. And I guess as a student in your economics class right now, I guess I'm starting to understand what you're writing about, the terminologies. You teach us that in the lectures. So I guess, why do you write posts and articles? And is it important for students to also write posts and articles, and what type of posts should we be writing about?
I write posts and articles in LinkedIn because I think a topic will be of interest. I mean, I wouldn't write about it if it wasn't of interest. I write about it if it's innovative. So if it's something that others haven't heard about, or there's a method in there that people haven't seen or done before. So I don't like just rehashing, I don't like anything that's boring or not innovative, because I don't think that's of interest to people. I think you need to differentiate yourself from the others. You need to write things that are innovative and interesting. So I do that just to pique interest in the topic and the subject area, but also to generate consulting leads as well, if that's, but I mean, not so much now probably, but when early on in the piece, when I was writing in LinkedIn, I would write a lot of articles to generate interest in what I was doing and what I could do and potential consultancies. And I've generated a lot of consultancies, a lot of consulting business from these articles. So Hong Kong Express, WestJet, Air New Guinea, and Virgin Australia, Air New Zealand, Delta. I've consulted to a lot of these airlines on the basis of LinkedIn articles. So that's Turkish Airlines is another one. So I think there's opportunities there to do those two things: generate interest in whatever you're doing, and just to write something innovative and interesting for the aviation community.
All right. Well, as we all know, I think the reason that we're both interviewing online right now is because of the COVID-19 virus. The aviation industry is currently going through really unprecedented times right now. First of all major airlines are now like suspending all of their flights. Thousands of staff in each airline being laid off, and these are throughout the whole globe. Share prices of all airlines are at all times low. So, and if we look at the Australian aviation market right now, we see that the government also last week created a rescue package, $715 million, but it's still chaotic. Virgin Australia and Qantas they're now in this scuffle. Alan Joyce really wants to see the end of Virgin Australia, with this ACCC thing going on. So I guess, what is the future of aviation now, and what will our Australian airlines make it out alive? Like Rex Airline also are waving the white flag. They can't stand it anymore, and they need more support on top of the government support. So is there any hope, Tony?
Yeah. This is a temporary thing. It's going to be temporary, like SARS was. It's obviously a little bit more widespread and has a deeper impact than SARS, but it will be temporary. The world economy and the Australian economy and aviation will get through it. SARS lasted about, it was really, April, May, June 2003. This will probably last longer than that, maybe 4 or 5 or 6 months rather than 3 months, but we'll get through it. And in Australia, we'll get through it definitely. And I don't think it'll be the case of an aviation industry just with one player standing, as Alan Joyce has been commenting on, the last airline standing, which is really a silly thing to say, and that's why it provoked the ACCC. I think you'll always see two players in the Australian domestic market. The market's big enough for two players, and really, when I was at Qantas wanted a second player. They wanted a second player in the market. They wanted a Virgin or an Ansett. And the reason they wanted a Virgin or an Ansett is because if they were one player, they'd be more heavily scrutinised by the ACCC. Certainly more scrutinised than they are now. So most people within Qantas believe that they need Virgin in the market, but they want a weak Virgin. I mean, that's the optimal situation. So they want a second player, but they want that player to be relatively weak. And it's exactly what they're getting now. Virgin is really, really struggling. There's no doubt about that. They will struggle to survive, but I think that the government really wants a two-player market, and on that basis, they're likely to provide some form of assistance to enable them to retain their position in the market. There won't be a situation in which Virgin leaves and Rex leaves and all you've got is Qantas and Jetstar. It's not going to happen. There's going to be a two-player market no matter what. And even if Virgin does leave, another airline will re-enter the market as well, because they know that there's profits to be made for two players, not just one.
Do you think the government will be having any plans for nationalising Virgin Australia per se? Or?
No, they won't. Well, because Virgin's partly owned by a British entrepreneur, a Singapore airline, so an airline in Singapore, airline companies, related companies in China. I think there are two of those, and there's a Middle East airline. So I think it'll be hard for the government to take on ownership of that airline, given that foreign interest. Governments aren't in the business of owning assets anymore. They're selling them all off. They sold off Australia Post. They sold off the Commonwealth Bank. They sold off Qantas back in the 90s. So they have no interest in running airlines or any other company again, I think. So they're not in the business of buying back assets, but they will need assistance. They've got a huge labour bill to pay. They'll have they have to repay continue payments on aircraft that are being delivered. They'll probably have options to delay those aircraft coming in, but they've got bills to pay and they've got no revenue coming in. And so the cash balance, I think Qantas has a cash balance of 1.7 billion and Virgin has a cash balance of about 1 billion. There's only so far that cash balance can go.
So I guess what does this mean for the future of aviation? Will the short-term future mean that there'll be less routes or tickets will be higher, or?
The short term is that there are no routes.
No routes.
Hardly any. No. Well, they've completely closed down international. Basically, I think 90% reduction in capacity, and there's 60% reduction domestic. That's for Qantas, and Virgin has come out recently saying there are no more Tiger flights, and I think domestic capacity has been reduced by 90% domestically. I think Qantas will follow shortly, and Rex has said it's stopped flying altogether. I'm not sure, but I'd have to check. But there will be no flying very, very shortly. There will be bits and pieces of flying to get Australian residents home and foreign residents back to their country of origin as well. But over the next month or so, I suspect that it will all close down and the airports will be ghost towns. You can't fly from New South Wales into WA or Adelaide or Northern Territory or Queensland now because of the border closures. So domestic will shut down shortly as well. So that's the short term, but it'll bounce back. It'll bounce back in the medium to long term. It'll be business as usual within about 5 or 6 months.
So I guess that's a good hope that it will bounce back. It's definitely going to be a tough year for aviation this year. So I guess finally, do you have any final advice for aviation students trying to get a job in the industry, especially those who are probably graduating this year?
I think you just got to work really, really hard. In my subject, Avia 1901, and in term 2, it's 1902. There are difficult aspects to those subjects, and they're new things and they're difficult things, so it takes you a while to absorb them. The airline business is what I call a slow absorber. It takes you, it's so many different things you have to learn that it takes time. You won't learn these things overnight, so take your time learning these concepts and tools slowly, because if you do that, you'll get on top of them, and you'll understand them a lot better, and they'll be more useful to you when you get a job. When you, throughout your degree, and hopefully if you do high levels of study in aviation beyond just a bachelor's degree, it's important you be innovative and you stand out in the crowd. And so you've got to make sure to be able to stand out and be innovative by the time you get to third year or even fourth year. You really have to understand the basics. And so that's what I've done throughout my whole career. Really understand the basics. Once you've got a handle on the basics, then you can apply those to innovative situations. I can still remember the formula for solving a quadratic equation: minus b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac on 2a. I know that because when I went through, the axis of symmetry is equal to minus b on 2a. And the formula for compound interest is a equals p times 1 plus r to the power of n times t. If you learn those basics, just learn them and learn them really well so that they're in here forever, then that's a really important basis for understanding the really more sophisticated analytical measures. And so, like students of Aviation 1901 have asked me, Tony, do I have to remember all of these formulae? Yeah, you do. It's a good thing to do that. It's a lot of them, but don't take shortcuts. Learn them and memorize them, because they're the things that are going to hold you in good stead in years 2, 3, and 4 when you have to start apply those concepts to difficult situations. So that's my most important advice. Really take your time to learn the basics and have them sitting up here for the rest of your life, and you'll do really well.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tony Webber, for your chat with us. We really appreciate it.
No, my pleasure. Good stuff.